In 1968, in Greensboro, North Carolina, I was a senior at James B. Dudley High School. I loved weekend parties. On the weekends, someone at my school at least one person would be giving a party on a Friday night or a Saturday night. Sometimes there'd be like several parties on Friday night, as well as several parties on Saturday night on the same weekend. And I made it my business to be at all of them. Now, I was not necessarily invited. In fact, I wasn't invited to all of them, but I made it my business to be at all of them. Now, the parties were given by people that I went to school with, so I felt comfortable to show up. If there was a person giving a party that I didn't feel comfortable with, then I would skip that party. But for the most part, I just went to every party that I heard about. And like I said, I would hear about them because I was not necessarily directly invited to them. But I justified that by saying, well, they know I'm coming. I'm coming to the party anyway. So it would be redundant to invite me when you know I'm coming. I'm coming. I'm going to support you. I'm going to be there. So I would show up. There was only one time when I was not allowed. I was turned away from a party. And I was recently talking to a friend of mine, Doris, who was a friend of mine who we went to high school together. And we were recently just talking about the time we were turned away from the party. And that was because the girl's mama was on the door. The girl's mama was on the door with a list. And she would ask you your name and look at the list. And if you weren't on the list, she'd say, you can't come in. You're not on the list. Embarrassing. Turned away from a party. Usually nobody's mama was on the door like that. Usually you would arrive at a house, you knock on the door or ring the bell. They'd say come in or open the door. If you look decent, nobody cared. You just stayed and you partied. Now, the food at the party usually consisted of chips, various types of chips, Kool-Aid and or some types of punch. And if it was a birthday, of course, a cake, and other times maybe a cookies or something like that. These were what we called house parties. They were in the house and or basement parties because they were in your finished basement. If it was nice weather and spring, sometimes they would be backyard parties. Most of the time they were house and or basement parties that I attended. My mother worked the graveyard shift at L. Richardson Hospital, which meant that she went in at midnight and she got off at about 7 o'clock in the morning, which meant that the car was free for me. Now, I had my license by the time I was a senior, so the car was free in the afternoons and the evenings, so that if I needed to drive myself to somewhere for a theater rehearsal, or if I needed the car for a party on the weekend, as long as I had the car back in time for my mother to go to work, if she happened to be working on that weekend, then I was good to go. She did say you had to come with your own gas, gas was somewhere around 35 cents. I think the average was like 35, maybe 45, but I think it was more like 35. And I do know that there were some places where you could get a gallon of gas for 25 cents. Now, here's what is embarrassing is that sometimes it was hard to come up with 25 or 35 cents for some gas. But whoever I was riding with, usually it was a girl named Frances. She was my party traveling buddy. Usually her, and sometimes it was just different people, but mainly I remember Frances. But whoever was riding with me, we pooled our money together and we tried to come up with at least $1. If we got $1, we knew we were good to go. One of the reasons why I liked going to the parties too was because you got to wear your best skirt, your best shirt or sweater. You just got to do something a little extra, wear your hair a little different than you would normally wear it at school, or wear an accessory in your hair that you wouldn't have worn to school. So you're just going out to the parties, and I like the idea of just getting a little fancier. We would go to a party and we'd look around and see who was there, and basically it was kind of like we'd look for guys that we had crushes on. Now, these guys didn't know we had crushes on them, but they were just guys that amongst ourselves we had talked about. So we'd go to a party and we'd hang out, dance for a little while, see who was there, and if we didn't see the guys or a guy that we wanted to see. Then we say, let's go to the next party. And so we go to the next party, and then we do the same thing, dance a little bit, have a few chips, look around, see who's there. And so that was our thing. That was fun to do, and we would go to all these parties. And like I said, the thing was dancing. I loved to dance, and there was fast dancing, and then there was what they called a slow drag. It wasn't really a drag, it was just kind of like moving side to side, or sometimes just even standing still close to that person who had invited you to dance slow with them. Now, I love most any song you can name from that era. I love that. I tell you one song though that I love. It was a great song, but I didn't like when they played it at parties. And that was a song called You've Lost That Loving Feeling by the Righteous Brothers. You never close your eyes anymore when I kiss your lips. That song. Okay, now that was a good song, but I'll tell you why I didn't like it at parties. Is because, as I recall, that was a very long song. So to be, as they call, slow dragging with somebody that you weren't really that into, and sometimes it would be hot because we were into our sweaters now. We all had our wool sweaters, and in the fall and winter, in those wool sweaters and a hot basement, and you're leaning up against somebody and you're trying to slow drag, and you're trying not to get your freshly pressed hair to, as we used to say, go back. That means get kinky again, and be dancing to a song as long as that song. I just remember that song being so long, to the point where when I heard that song was coming on, I would just get up and go to the bathroom because I didn't want to, that song was just too long. Now, I don't really remember having parties myself. I may have had small gatherings, but I don't remember having a party except one time. I remember there was a game at my high school on this particular night. It was a spring night. The weather was amazing. It was just a perfect night. And there was a game at the high school stadium, and I was there. And then I remember telling somebody, you know what? I'm going to have a party after this is over at my house. And I'm thinking I'll just go by the store, get some chips, get some Kool-Aid, and we're just going to have a party. I said, so if you want a party, just come by my house. Now, this is when I first started finding out what payback is about. Because I was just trying to have a small gathering at my home. What ended up happening is word spread through the game as the game was going on. By the time the game was over, it seemed like everybody at the game, even the other team, showed up at my house. Now, I only lived in a small 2-bedroom house with an unfinished basement. My basement was good for only storage. There were people in the living room, people in the den, people in the kitchen, people in the front yard, people in the backyard. There were people everywhere. Now, my father, who worked for the post office, got off from work at midnight. And when he came into the house, he was looking around like, what just happened up in here? And I was looking at him as if to say, I don't know what happened either. But I guess now I know how people feel when other people who you don't invite come to your party. That was one of the things that I really enjoyed. I loved a good party.